Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another beautiful Friday. Mark, how are you today, my friend?
I'm in pain, dude. I hurt my shoulder somehow,
Oh,
but I'm just gonna keep fighting and go through. Look at this, man. I'll tell you, these weather people are like stock market people. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, they're saying we're gonna get 7 inches of rain. It's like, a couple of days ago they said this weekend was gonna be nice.
hey, you know what, Mark?
So New York City to see.
Last night I was watching the Y Files. That show I watch with the talking fish. Either way, they were doing Plum Island last night. Holy smokes, the crap you got going on right across the street from you.
Yeah, dude. They say so. Plum Island is kind. It's pretty close to where Lyme, Connecticut is. Plum Island is part of New York, but it's close to Connecticut. And a lot of people say that that's where Lyme disease came from.
It is, Mark. That's the guy that they brought in, the Nazi that they brought in, the Americans brought in, was a specialist in infecting ticks, and the thing got away from. I mean, they showed it on the show last night. It's pretty wild. You got to watch it. It's called the Y Files.
The Y files?
The Y Files. WHY.
Yeah, and Plum Island is on Long Island, and on Long Island, I think people have like a 75% greater chance of getting Alzheimer's than in other parts of the country.
Yeah, and they were talking about
Um,
the Montauk monster and these animals that were washing up on shore that didn't even look like they could even be animals.
well, the Montauk Monster is a raccoon.
Was it?
That's,
Well, they
yeah,
had 7 or 8 of them that were like that. They showed a bunch of different pictures of it, and one of them had a beak, 5 or 6 different clothes. So if it was a raccoon, that's good. Didn't look like a raccoon
and
though.
there's Lake Ronkonkoma out there too, which supposedly has an Indian curse on it, and it's like I think like over the last 50 years, one person drowns, and it's even one woman. It's all men. Um,
Oh wow,
and they say that yeah, it was like some like Indian princess was forbidden by her
calls them into the
father
pond.
because she fell in love with some white guy, and the father forbid it, and she ended up committing suicide in the lake. And the curse was that every year she was going to take someone, and it's pretty uncanny, man. It's like oh yeah, baby otter survives orca attack. Oh, that's nice.
That's nice.
When I was in Alaska one time, well, I was only there once, but I was out on the fishing boat, and I asked the captain, I'm like, "What's the craziest thing you've ever seen?" And he said he saw a grizzly bear jump into the water and grab a seal, and right as it grabbed the seal, a killer whale came up and grabbed the grizzly bear. So
Holy
pretty wild.
smokes!
Yeah, it's wild up there, dude, because it's so you can see like in the water, you can see like the water is so clear because it's so cold. There's no algae.
Yeah,
So like when you go out on this like the fishing boat, like I went halibut fishing, like if the orcas come and they swim under the boat, you can just totally see them. You could see down like 50 or 60 feet in the water. It's
that's
really
wild.
incredible. Well, yeah, it's cute, but otters are supposed to be nasty. Or
Hey,
otters
let
are
me tell
nasty.
you something, man. I used to hunt by a spot, and this otter would come down, and he'd see me every day. I'd get in my tree stand, and he would sit there and he'd grab rocks, and he wasn't eating anything. He would just grab these rocks and he would smack them together whenever I would be in my tree stand, right underneath my tree stand. I hated that otter.
Maybe it was like trying to scare you away or something.
He was scaring the deer away, letting everybody know that there was a predator in the woods.
Really? Wow,
Yeah,
that's interesting. All right.
they're
Anyway,
sick, man.
I was
Squirrels do
watching
the same thing.
this stuff yesterday about Biden and the impeachment thing,
Yeah,
and I think he's done, man. I think he's done. I think eventually these Democrats are going to turn on him because they kept going to this de facto thing. It's like, okay, every time the Republicans have a point, it's like, oh, wait a second. We got a wire to Joe that has Joe Biden's address on it for $350,000, $250,000. And then it's like, then the response is, Donald Trump is corrupt.
yeah.
It's like we're not here talking about Donald Trump. It's like it's like when you're yelling at your kid and they just like try to change the subject. You know,
The real sad part about it is that there is a complete mirror opposite of what happened with Trump's presidency and this presidency. And the media, I want to know when the media is going to stop carrying water for them and they're going to start doing the right thing and actually telling the truth again, because eventually, people are going to turn them off. You get tired of listening to this stuff that's just nothing but lies, and you're
I think it's kind of turning because this is not complicated stuff. People can understand what a bribe is or what
Yep.
you know what I mean?
Yep.
And when I was watching it, just the way that the Democrats kind of just seemed like scared, and but you know what? Eventually the dam's going to break. Someone's going to turn on them, and then everyone's going to say, all right, well, we're going to have a new whatever, and how can I position myself? But I don't think it's about Democrat or Republican. I think it's about we got a guy in office who's a frigging crook.
Yeah. This is an American issue, man. And Mark, I'm an independent. I don't have a allegiance to really anything anymore. I honestly am just an American that wants my tax dollars to be used correctly, and I want my kids to be free, and I don't want them to have to worry about being forced into a bathroom with a guy. That's all I want. And you know what I mean? And it's insane that you can't get the rest of the country to say, hey, you know what? Feelings don't matter. Your feelings don't matter to anybody. So why should they matter to everybody else around you? Go grow up and quit this woke crap and let's move on with life.
Well, you know what? It's like you could hate Donald Trump and think Joe Biden's crooked. It's not like one. They're not mutually exclusive, and it's
Absolutely.
like the whole thing is every time you bring up. I mean, so there are things that are self-evident. Okay, now Congress has the right to review these suspicious activity reports from banking, right? Right. So it's a way to prevent money laundering.
Yep.
So the president, the first day he's in office, changes the rules so the Congress can't have access to those reports anymore. Now, why would he do that? Like, what benefit is there to the country that Congress can't review these reports anymore? And it's like it's just self-evident. Then we find out that Biden's got 176 suspicious activities tied to his name. It's like it's freaking self-evident, man. You don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to figure out that something's going on here.
Mark, I don't know if you've ever ran for office anymore or held public office, but when you do though, right? You fill out a form every year. You have to fill out a financial disclosure form and let people know where your money's coming from, right? And where your income comes from. That is a law. So if it's done at a local level, at a little city with 1,000 people, why is it not done at the United States government? And if these people should have to prove where their money comes from. They should.
Well, they did. Like Biden filled out something, and it supposedly it says he said he had $6 million less than he said he had like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So
in reality, they got diamonds and Porsches and crack and everything else they can possibly stick in themselves or in their pockets.
And now the narrative is like, oh, well, Joe just loves his son. Well, if he loved his son, why would he be pimping him out around the world to go get money?
Yeah. Well, I watched them yesterday. They were pushing the younger Democrats to get out there and just pour it out of how much this man loved his son, and trying to get the younger people in this country to just feel good about it. And you know something? The law is what this country is about, not about your feelings. It really is. This lack of following the law is just amazing.
Yeah, it's pathetic. All right. Anyway, on to happier subjects like the market.
Please.
The first thing I want to do is take a look at oil, because I think we are about to see a big. Well, I think we're going to be talking a lot about inflation I think the inflation is going to be coming back. So here's oil, and not surprisingly, we got to this 93 level, and we kind of just froze there. But I think we're going to move higher. Now, a lot of times when things get to resistance, like here and here, you get to resistance and you get this quick sell-off, right? Because what's resistance? Well, it's a bunch of people that want to sell, and they notice that the price isn't moving higher anymore, and they deduce that there are more sellers coming into the market. So some of the sellers get worried that they're going to miss out, so they start to reduce the prices they're willing to sell at, and you get this snowball effect. Now here, like look at that, we got to 93, we were there for 2 days. Here we're kind of consolidating. Consolidating means trading sideways. And the longer we stay here, well, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think that this resistance is going to break and it's going to move higher. And all this, we see this inflation going on, but as of now, it's all in energy. It hasn't really spread through to other things. Um, it hasn't spread through to like the agriculturals, the wheat, cotton, rice, all that stuff is still trending lower. So once that stuff starts to turn, and it will, because farmers need diesel fuel, then we're all of a sudden we're going to get these surges of inflation. So natural gas is holding up pretty good here. I think this is going to break out too, but I don't think I would buy it until it gets above 3. See how we got to resistance there at 3, and resistance at 3, and now we've got resistance at 3 again. And it's pretty amazing that a market this big could have such precise levels, but that's because it's people that are trading it, and people like round levels. So when it got to 2, people were buying. It got to 3, people were selling. But if we look at, I don't know, I'll just pull up, I guess, just wheat, for example. The harvest will turn the prices. Yeah. Yeah. I noticed last night, I was sitting in my backyard, that I got these big maple trees and the leaves are like brown and dry. And this morning I look in here, and I don't subscribe to the Stanford Advocate because it's a leftist rag, frankly. But I wanted to read this article. Here's why maple leaves in Connecticut are turning brown and falling early, according to experts. But I don't subscribe to it, so I can't read it. So this is what my maple tree leaves look like in my backyard, but I don't subscribe. So oh wait, maybe I can see.
Aren't you getting into the change of the season right now?
Yeah, you see, this pops up, and I don't want to subscribe to this. Yeah, it's nice, man. It's nice. It's raining today, but anyway, yeah. See, that's flash flooding. So I got to figure out why my leaves are brown. All right, now let's go look at the stock market. Oh gosh, I sprained my shoulder, man. It's like agony. It's I got to just stretch it out a little bit. All right, so looks like we got a little bit of a turn here. So now what we got to do, and this is not unusual action for when we break a level, get a little bit of a rebound, and now does the level that was support turn into resistance? And if it does, that sets the stage for the next move lower. So this support was right around 433. So we're at 430. So, I'm not surprised because the sentiment is really negative in the market. And when we get negative sentiment, that tends to actually be bullish, because if the vast majority of investors are bearish, which okay, Mr. Stevens, if the vast majority of investors are bearish, then they go ahead and they sell, and eventually the market runs out of sellers, and then the only place it can go is either sideways or up, because there's no more sellers left to push it down. So anyway, making a little bit of a turn. But the two things we got to watch are this, right? The tech sector and the financial sector. Now, notice how what was support has become resistance. This morning we're trading, this level is 163.50. This morning we're at 164. So we're pretty much right at that level. We can't get too precise. I mean, we're talking about a $160 security, and we're $1 above it. So this is going to be an important thing to watch here. Does this level remain resistance? The other thing is the financial sector looks pretty similar in the sense that it is testing this a potential resistance level as well. So we can see here, for whatever reason, this financial sector, we're looking at the ETF that tracks the financial sector. It likes this 3360 level. So it was support, then it became resistance, then it became support, and now will it become resistance again? So I think over the next few days, the main things we got to watch are what happens here and what happens in the tech sector. So between the tech sector and the financial sector, we're probably talking about 40% of the entire market. There's 11 sectors, but some of them are bigger than others.
Yeah.
So these are going to be the important things to watch. And a lot of this is going to come out of what goes on in the bond market. Let's see where interest. Wow, look at this. So rates got all the way up to 4.7 this morning. I mean, I don't think the market's going to have any kind of a sustained like rally as long as these interest rates are moving higher. This is a big move, man, and it looks like it can keep going. I mean, these are the highest the rates have been in 15 years. So higher interest rates are bad for stocks. It takes money out of the bottom line because it costs companies more money to borrow to run their businesses. It gives competition to the market because people might say, hey, if I can go in the bond market and get a 4.7 yield, I mean, that sounds pretty good. I'm going to take my money out of stocks and I'm going to go into the bond market. You can see that in, right, people tend to buy utility stocks because they want income. Utilities tend to pay high dividends. Now, look at this. Look at what's going on in the utility sector. It's just in a complete meltdown. I mean, look at that. It's like in a free fall. So what's going on here is people are selling their utility stocks because they can go into the bond market and get a better yield. When you invert the chart, what does it show? Well, interest rates are when we talk about like if you when the Fed is talking about raising rates or lowering rates, Jerome Powell and Janet Yellen and all their brilliant wisdom, Janet's going over there to China eating shrooms and dancing with what's his face,
Z.
bowing. That's so amazing that they don't bow in China. Like you bow in Japan, you bow in Korea. It's not a Chinese custom. So Janet Yellen goes over there and comes out and bows to the guy 3 times, and then we find out she was eating shrooms. So it's like, what is she at a Grateful Dead concert? Anyway, so the rates that the Fed talks about is what we call the federal funds rate. That is a rate that's set in stone. The government makes it and it doesn't change. That's the rate that banks lend to each other at. This is different. This is the yield of the 10-year Treasury. Now, Treasuries yields move in the opposite direction of bonds, right? If a bond goes lower, the yield goes higher. Think about this. If you have a bond that's issued at bonds are issued at what we call par, or $100 or $1,000, but just say it's $100, and it pays a 10% dividend. That means if you own the bond every year, you get $10. All right. Now let's just say in the market there's aggressive sellers, and they come in and they really sell the bond, and the bond goes down to 90. Well, if you go and buy the bond at 90, you're still going to get the $10. That doesn't change. So $10 on your $90 investment is going to be roughly, say, like an 11% yield. Conversely, if the bond gets bought really aggressively and goes up to, say, 110, anyone who buys the bond at 110 is still going to get the $10 annually, but that yield is going to be like maybe, say, just roughly 9%. So bonds move inversely to the yield. The amount of dividend that the bond pays never changes, but the price of the bond can change depending on what's going on in the market. So these are the 10-year yields, and these are inverse to the actual bond. So if I invert this chart, this is what the bond would look like. And as we can see, the bond just broke support. And it looks like this is some pretty aggressive selling, and it looks to me like it could probably continue. So that's what we're looking at here. The market sets the yield as opposed to the government, and it's pretty it's pretty interesting because these are all the same things that we see. These are all the same principles that we see, like what was support can turn into resistance, because this is People don't trade interest rates. People trade bonds. So this is why we're susceptible to all the same things. Like what was resistance here became support. But it's really, you got to think about it if we're looking at the bond, right? So what was resistance? I mean, sorry, what was support here became resistance over here. So ultimately, these are just determined by the same emotions that we see in commodities markets or in stock markets and so forth and so on. TLT still got it. Yeah, so this is a bond ETF. And I mean, this thing is getting rocked, right? So, I mean, it looks kind of similar to the chart we were just looking at. I think that, well, I think that the government really is just, they've
Screwing
just
up.
really mismanaged these whole, you know, I mean, pal, like these people don't know what the hell they're doing.
Well, Mark, it gets to the point to where when you're wrong on every single aspect, you either do what George Costanza did and do the opposite, or you're just doing it on purpose.
It's just, they've just been so wrong. And there's a reason for it. The reason why they've been so wrong is because they follow the Keynesian methodology, right? And Keynes was this economist, and he was like back in the 1920s. He was. We did a newsletter on him once.
Mm-hmm.
You remember? And the
Can't get it.
Keynesians only look at what we call this demand side of the market or the economy, and that's the consumer. So when they see interest rates going higher, their instinct is to say, "Oh, the economy is doing well. That's why interest rates are going up. When the economy is doing really well, it's inflationary and it makes interest rates move higher." All right. They don't look at the money supply. The money supply is the amount of money that's in the economy. Now, think about it. If you have an economy where you have $100 and 100 goods, those goods are going to end up costing $100. If the government comes along and pumps another $100 into the economy, now you have $200 and 100 goods. Those 100 goods are going to end up costing $200. That's just how economics works. So when the government comes along and spends all this money or puts out all this stimulus, it's inflationary. But these Keynesians like Janet Yellen and Jerome Powell don't look at that. So that's why they're so horribly wrong. There's another school of economics called the monetary school, which was founded by Milton Friedman, and they look at the money supply, right? So you would think that someone would look at both of them, and you might say, well, gee, Mark, come on. How are people in these prominent positions like so attached to these dogmas? And I will tell you this, after the market really blew up in the housing crisis back in '08 or '09 or whenever it was, after that, Congress did their big study on what went wrong. And guess what? One of the reasons why they say that Alan Greenspan was too attached to the principles of Ayn Rand, who are on Rand. I'm not sure I say the person who wrote When Atlas Shrugged, that book. And it's like, so Greenspan was so wrong because he followed some economist's thoughts, right? So it's kind of the same thing now, but it's 20 years later, and it's like, I mean, they've just been so wrong. I mean, it's incredible. Inflation is transitory, but you got to wonder. You know, at first I thought they were saying inflation was transitory because they didn't want to say we had inflation leading up into the election.
Right.
Now I think they're just wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, oh, look at
Yeah.
that. Here's our descending triangle pattern. So I don't really use too many patterns. I think a lot of them are bogus. But when you see something like this, when you get this flat support level, right? That this is what we would call a descending triangle. You get this support level that doesn't change. So look at that. Ironically enough, this is exactly at $100. You get the support level doesn't change. What does this show us? You got to look at charts through the context of what does it tell us about supply and demand. So the buyers are hanging out. The buyers are like, you know what? I'm going to stay down here at 100. If someone comes to me and wants to sell, then I'll buy. But if not, I don't care. I'm going to miss out, and I don't mind. So the buyers are like kind of chill, but the sellers are getting more aggressive as time goes by. And that's what this descending line shows. So you can see that we have these lower highs, right? This high formed here, but then the next peak formed here. The next one was here, like lower highs. That tells us sellers are getting more aggressive. So we see these same patterns, and regardless of what we're looking at, whether it's stocks or bonds, because it's people that are trading them. And when we look at these chart patterns, it shows us it's a graphical illustration of supply and demand, or I mean, of market psychology, or actually both. But the descending triangle pattern tends to be um, pretty, I guess, reliable is the right word. But you don't really hear me talk about double tops and triple tops because the way that technicians look at that stuff is they look at it like in the past, right? By the time you say, "Oh, this is a confirmed double top," it's like a big part of the move is already passed. Uh, so, all right, so that's what's going on there. Um, oh, hey, I spoke with Chloe for a long time yesterday, probably about an hour, Heather.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Heather's stepdaughter. She's smart and she's got a personality too. So she's going to be very, I think she'll be very successful because she's got like a quantitative background. So basically, she's a young girl and she's in college and she's thinking about going on to Wall Street. So she just had a lot of questions about various, like, what do investment bankers do? Um, what do analysts do? What's the
You're a good dude, Mark.
um, well, I don't know. I just like helping people, Um, so, but anyway, she is got a real personality, and she's going to be competing against a lot of people that don't have personalities. A lot of these quantitative people, engineers and statisticians, they're pretty like nerdy, and they don't have, they're not. What's the right word?
They don't
Personable
have
or
any swagger.
gregarious or whatever. So she'll be. My guess is that she will do very well. No problem. And she can call me anytime. You know what I told her? Oh, that reminds me. I got to write this down. I told her I was going to send her some models, some Excel models I had made. So I'm going to put that on my things to do list for today. Okay, let's see what is going on here. More inflation stuff here. What's going on in mining? Higher expenses threaten to increase prices for consumers and complicate central banks inflation fight. Let's see. 2 years ago, Liontown Resources talked up its plan for a $300 million lithium mine to help power the world's transition. Oh man, my neck is killing me.
Did you know that 85% of the rare earth metals that are needed to create an electric car are in China, and they have control of it?
I know it's pretty scary, man. We are so reliant on China, and what really struck me was during the COVID thing, I heard that we get 90% of our medicine from China.
Yeah.
So if China ever said, "Hey guys, guess what? We're not going to give you any medicine," so all of a sudden people are going to be. I mean, I hate to laugh, but it's like people are going to be like dropping dead, like heart attacks, and it's you.
It's
Everyone's going
all
to get fat again because they cut off the.
listen. Don't you know what makes a conspiracy? A conspiracy is when it's not proven, but all the stuff that they talk about turns out to be true. So are they conspiracies, or are they just people telling the truth? That's weird.
What kind of struck me yesterday when I was watching the impeachment stuff is, communists are supposed to like be communists,
Yes,
but in China, these communists are all really wealthy.
they're capital communist.
It's like the whole concept of communism is you're not supposed to own stuff; it's supposed to be owned by the society. So these are like the richest communists probably in history. But I think it's so funny. It's like they send Hunter a wire. It's got Joe Biden's address on it.
Just send it to my pop's house.
It's just so self evident. This guy's on the board of Burisma, and I don't know who that guy is. He's one of the Democrats. He's the guy from New York. I forget his name. But it's like he argues, and you would think that he was a Republican. because he's like, all right, well, all right, so Hunter Biden got this, Hunter Biden got that, Hunter Biden got this. It's like he's basically admitting it, and it's like, but it hasn't been tied to Joe. It's
Right.
like, okay, we're just going to give this guy $50 million just because we like him. You know, it's like, I guess
What
they're
planet
just
does that happen on? I wish somebody would come do that to me. I wish somebody would just come drop me a bunch of money in my pool. Say, here, man, I'm gonna drop some money for you. It's a joke.
well, you should go. I heard Rosemont Seneca is hiring.
Mark,
So
I'm too honest.
yeah, right. It's just you know, and then this guy gets these prostitutes and he writes it off as a business expense. You know, how come the Democrats are so like? Remember the what was the movement where the Me Too movement?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, and now all of a sudden you got this guy that's like, you know, using all these prostitutes, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, sex trafficking, you know, it's like, whatever.
Yeah, it's no big
We're only
deal.
going to care about it when it's Republican.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the way it works.
Unbelievable.
I tell you what is funny is that, you know, you watch them, how they talk about all this stuff with these kids. You've got a real serious thing that you found with those children missing in Ohio. And there's a real problem with that in this country, in the world, period. I think that we've got, you know, the more that I go down the rabbit hole on this thing, man, with these kids and what people are doing with them, it's really not good.
Well, let me tell you something, man. My sister is a school psychologist, and last year they had two kids from her school got abducted, and one of them they found, but the other one is still missing. And what happens is these sexual predators, they, you know, they go online and you get these girls who are, you know, maybe they're lonely, they don't have a boyfriend, maybe
Or
they're
one
not
mom,
good
no
looking,
parents.
and they meet these guys online, right? And the guys are like, oh, you know, you're so beautiful, you know, you want to get together. And so that's what they do. They target these kids who are lonely and who are online. So yeah, so like that one girl, I think she was like maybe like 10 years old, 11 years old, she like disappeared. And unfortunately, my sister is a psychologist in like a real, you know, ghetto area. So these are poor minority children, and like, you know, like people don't care. If it was like a pretty young blonde girl from a wealthy family, it would be headline news. You know what I mean? So it's sad, but it's a reality. You know, I mean, how many kids disappear that you don't even hear about?
Right.
This is where I live, right down in here. It's like, wow, we're gonna get some serious rain today. But yeah, New York City may see 7 inches of rain. That's a lot of rain.
Well, it'll wash a lot of the rats out into the river.
Oh, speaking of that, my wife was in the kitchen last night, and I heard her scream, and I'm like, "What's going on?" And she said a mouse came running right across the floor. But you know, when it starts getting colder, the mice come in. We get mice every year, and unfortunately, I feel bad, but I gotta use mouse traps to kill
Yeah.
them, because one time our alarm system stopped working, and the alarm guy came over and he said what happens is the mice in the walls, they chew on the wires.
Makes your teeth
They
feel
like the way the electricity feels. And a couple of years ago in the neighborhood here, there was a house that actually caught on fire because the mice were the Ryder Cup, because the mice chew on the wires and then their bodies catch on fire. So unfortunately, you got to kill them, or at least get rid of them. I used to use the Havahart traps, and I would just bring them back into the woods. But you know, that way they're just going to become like owl food or whatever.
yeah.
The U.S. has fallen in Rome so far. Oh, so the Ryder Cup is.
That's not a bad idea.
Oh, I didn't realize that this is. What's that?
You need a terrier, a friend for Clifford. And terriers will get those rats.
Clifford doesn't want any friends. You know, we used to have Ginger, who was a golden retriever, and Clifford used to push her around. Like, I would give them each a bone, and Ginger would be on one couch, and Clifford would be on the other couch. And like, I would leave the room and come back, and Clifford would be sitting there with both bones. But then we got Lola, and she was like a mastiff, and she used to bully Clifford. All right, so Yeah, she would push him around. So he wants to be a one dog. He's so funny though. Like my daughter has a hamster, and like last night, like I go to give the hamster food, and like Clifford just runs over and pushes in between me and the hamster because he gets so jealous if I show any attention to the hamster or to any of our
You're his
guinea
person,
pigs.
Mark.
All right, I'm a little bit confused here. I thought the Ryder Cup happened already. What am I
No, it started
thinking
yesterday.
of? Huh. All right, cool. Well, I'll have to watch that. Rory McIlroy. All right. Anyway, let's go see what else is going on in the news here. Let's see what stocks are moving this morning.
XOM's up to 120. CVX,
Yeah, that's going to be moving with oil.
yeah. Google seems to be Google's at 134.75.
I'm going. These guys at Trading View really like purple. They have purple in like
Everything.
the background.
Well, that's the purple of
Let's,
royalty.
I wonder. It's got to have like some kind of scientific thing. Like maybe people think it's better to see or it's easier to see. All right, so here are stocks that are moving in the pre-market, and you got to kind of be careful with some of these things because it's a penny stock. Right, so these penny stocks, Blue Apron Holdings. So it's up over $7. So let's take a look at that. Blue Apron Holdings. What is going on here? So it closed at 549. It's trading at 1285. 1285. Blue Apron stock soars as acquisition. Okay, so it's getting taken over. All right, well, if something's getting taken over, then it's pretty much out of play. It's not really worth our while to pay attention to. The only way it could potentially go higher is if someone else comes and gives it a higher bid. All right, so it looks like Nike's moving. Let's see what's going on with Nike. Nike, JP Morgan, it raised the target to 137 from 136. Okay, that's impactful. So I guess they must have reported. But we can see here, right? Support, resistance. A lot of times when here's something to look for, right? When a company opens up really high from the prior close or much lower than the previous close, sometimes those moves are overdone, right? Look at that. So support becomes resistance. Support becomes resistance. So sometimes those moves are overdone. People see the headline and they jump in or they sell. But if it turns out that the news is not as bad as it originally appeared to be, or not as good as it originally appeared to be, there tends to be a reversal. And that reversal tends to happen around mid-morning, like around maybe 10 or 11 in the morning. And there's a reason for that. So right now, you got all these Wall Street analysts are going through the Nike numbers. And they're saying, is this move justified? Should it really be up about 10%? So if they start to go through the numbers and they start to see like, hey, these numbers are good, but they're not as good as people originally thought, we better take advantage of this strength and we're going to go start selling. That move tends to happen like around mid-morning because it takes them a couple hours to go through all the numbers. Now, if the news is really good and it's as good as it seemed, the stock will either kind of stay flat from where it opens or it will trend higher. But sometimes when you get these really big moves on the open, you get that reversal that comes around mid-morning, and that's something to look for. That's pretty funny. 137 to 136.
Got a question from Heather here, Mark.
Ooh. SMCI. Oh man, my neck is really killing me. Super microcomputer. To 300. Where is this morning? Oh, that's up again. I would be looking. There's probably going to be some resistance here. I would think around 285. I'm just looking at this like former peak here. So I would think that would be the next stop. But yeah, look at this. So each time it's gotten up to 300, it's come right in. But I guess if I was trading it, that would be my target, 285. And if it looks like it's going to break, then yeah, the next target probably would be like 300. Then the next thing I would look at would be
that gap. Wow.
up here. Yeah, so if we get to through 300, probably we could get to there pretty easily. So we tend to find support and resistance at former peaks and former valleys. Dianne Feinstein died.
Oh, you know what's going to happen? I bet you that Gavin Newsom appoints Nancy Pelosi as the senator from California.
Wow. Is that how it works out there?
Well, it's how it works, period. If you have whatever governor is in office appoints the person that gets appointed to be the senator. And Feinstein was being taken care of by Nancy Pelosi's daughter for the last year.
Yeah, I mean, she was in rough shape. She's a poster. I don't want to say.
Steve's been under that kind of rule for a long time out there, hadn't you, buddy?
Well, it's like, she is probably going down and not up. So the biggest house in the country is owned by a golfer. That's one of these misleading headlines. It's like, why don't they just show it? There's this house in Greenwich, the biggest house in Greenwich. It was actually a castle that they brought over from somewhere, and I think it was Austria.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, this place is freaking huge. I actually went there as on a field trip when I was in like second grade. I don't know who lives there. It's like some royalty. But, wow, look at that. So that is quite a big home. All right. Anyway, yeah. Well, I don't think I'm going to mourn Dianne Feinstein, but that's interesting. Yeah, Nancy Pelosi probably won't really change anything though, because they're just going to vote party line.
Yeah, but Nancy's nasty. She don't need 6 years as a senator.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think she's got 6 years left in her. Whatever happened with that thing where the guy like attacked her husband?
It just went away. Never heard of it again.
That was kind of bizarre, right? Like he lets the guy in the house. You would think that a senior congressperson would have some kind of security.
You would think.
Let's see what's going on. Yeah, well, you know what? That's why we need term limits. The more I think about it, I used to not be for term limits. I used to just think like, term limits or people can vote. But here's the problem, right? When people when all they care about is getting reelected, they don't do the right thing. If someone said, okay, well, I can serve 2 terms as senator and I've been a senator for 10 years and I got 2 years left. Maybe I'll do something that's right. Maybe I'll say, hey, we need to raise the entire retirement age, or we need to raise the age that you are when you get Social Security, right? They would do the right thing. But if their motivation is to just get reelected, well, then they're not going to do things that are controversial.
You know what my thought is? That we should have a national election. We would be better off with a national lottery that picked every 2 years a third of the Congress out of the population, sent them up there, and whatever they made it their job or whatever they did, their business was, the government kept their family back like they were, and they pay for their housing while they're in Congress. But every 2 years, a third of us have to go to Congress and serve, and then we go back home. And that would be the way to do it. That would be the best way to fix it.
I mean, when you see, like when I'm watching the impeachment thing yesterday, it's like some of these people there, are freaking idiots, man.
That's what I'm
You
saying,
know?
Mark. You'd have a better option. You would get a better turnout by having a random selection than you would by having these people that are popular go up and get themselves elected so that they can rob and steal.
I mean, this AOC, like, she could be the dumbest person that was ever elected to Congress. She just says stuff that is so dumb. And they were going to open up an Amazon fulfillment center in her district,
Mm-hmm.
and she came out against it. And it was really controversial. People in her district don't really like her. She's more of a national figure. But she came out and fought against it. And the only reason why she was against it is because the guy that owns Amazon is really wealthy. But that would have been thousands and thousands of jobs
Millions of dollars to the economy.
for her district. Yeah. Remember when they all pretended, when she pretended she was handcuffed?
Yeah.
After the like, Jesus, it's like, okay, we can tell you're not really handcuffed, but anyway, all right. So let's see. So you see, this is all coming out now. It's like front page of the Wall Street Journal. This guy's days are numbered, man. But now they're. Oh, look at this. Roberta Biden, Kathleen. It's like president, significant other, child of POTUS, grandchild of POTUS, sibling of POTUS, niece of POTUS. It's like she got like the heat map of corruption here.
I was watching, I know you don't like Tucker, but I was watching Tucker Carlson interview Bill O'Reilly yesterday, and they were talking about how bad Joe Biden was. And he said that actually we were right when we were talking about Buchanan being the worst president ever in history, because Buchanan basically just sat on his hands and let the Civil War happen. And this guy, he's just crooked. He's just crooked Joe Biden.
Yeah, I mean, that's the narrative, or that's what historians say about Buchanan. But the reality is, could anyone have stopped the Civil War? I mean, I don't know. And look at it this way, right? History, people don't really understand how history works. But Lincoln, when he was president, was a very unpopular president. There was the Peace Party wanted to bring the war to an end. Basically, he wanted to say, listen, all these kids are dying. It's just not worth it, right? So he was on the verge of, he was going to be voted out of office. And had he been, he would be considered like one of the worst presidents in our country's history. It's like, all right, well, this guy, let the Civil War get out of control, so forth and so on. So, but what happened was right before the election, General Sherman took Atlanta. And then when that happened, it was like, all right, basically the war, for all intents and purposes, is over. And that's what led Lincoln to get reelected. Now, had Sherman not taken Atlanta, Lincoln wouldn't have won the election, and George McClellan, who was one of Lincoln's generals, would have won the election. George McClellan was a Democrat, and he was pro-slavery, and if he became the president, he would have said, okay, the Confederacy can go be their own country, and we're going to be our country. So it was really just this like, if the Confederates stopped Sherman and he didn't take Atlanta, think of how different our country's history would be. Instead of being considered one of the greatest presidents, Lincoln would be considered like one of the worst presidents.
Yeah.
And when he died, I mean, this is kind of relevant considering that we're talking about impeachment. Lincoln chose Andrew Johnson to be his vice president because he was a Southerner. He was the only Southern senator that was like against secession. So it was like a strategic move. Okay, I'm Lincoln. I'm going to pick a Southern senator to try to get in some Southern votes. So after the Civil War, the government put in all these different things, like where Black people in the South were going to get rights and be able to vote and so forth and so on. So when Andrew Johnson took over, because he was a racist and he was pro-slavery and he was friends with all the Southerners, he started to kind of walk back all this stuff. So the radical Republicans wanted to go and impeach him to get him out of the office because he wasn't enforcing the Reconstruction. So he was going to, I don't know the exact story. I think he got impeached, but they didn't have enough votes in the Senate. But so he got impeached. And then we know that Clinton got impeached, which in hindsight, it's kind of like, I don't
That
know.
was dumb.
Yeah. Speaking of history, man, what about if Monica Lewinsky's mother didn't tell her to, don't
Save
get
the
that
dress.
new dress clean?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, think about that. The fact that Monica Lewinsky's mother told her not to bring her dress to the dry cleaners changed history because that DNA evidence would have been cleaned off and you would have never have seen it again. So pretty funny. All right, if no one has any questions, I'm going to get going. I got to drive up to my daughter's school now and pick her up, and it's like freaking pouring rain. But that's okay. I should be back early afternoon, and then I'll catch up with you. And I'm going to try to get this lesson uploaded. Yeah. All right, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
I guess I will see you on Monday. Have a nice weekend.
Have a wonderful day, people. We appreciate you, and we will see you on Monday.